Good evening, everyone. I would say we're going to start now. I think most of you have joined already. Some of you might still have a few issues with their audio signal, but you will hear me in just a few seconds. Fine, I think. So good evening, everyone in Europe. Good morning to our friends on the West Coast also, and I can say hello to everyone from all over the world. My name is Sabine Pavletta, and I am program manager at the Carl-Schurz-Haus, the German-American Institute in Freiburg, Germany, on whose behalf I'd like to welcome all of you to our transatlantic talk on this year's Earth Day, Black Forest meets Yosemite. This conversation is part of the event series EUREKA, Ländle meets California, a digital event series on the sister state partnership between Baden-Württemberg and California in the US. In monthly events, we explore what our two states have in common, what we can learn from each other, and how we can work together more closely. We want to initiate conversations that create new ideas and networking opportunities to further strengthen the partnership between California and Baden-Württemberg going forward. The series is organized by the DATS Stuttgart in cooperation with the German-American Institutes in Baden-Württemberg, Heidelberg, Tübingen, and us here at the Carl-Schurz-Haus in Freiburg. The series is generously supported by the State Ministry of Baden-Württemberg, and for tonight's event, we also cooperated with the US Consulate General in Frankfurt. Thank you to all of our partners for your support. We greatly appreciate it. So thank you very much. Tonight, on this Earth Day, we invited two experts from Yosemite National Park in California and the Black Forest National Park here in Germany, in Southwest Germany, Shelton Johnson and Dr. Susanne Stübner, to share their experiences, chances, and challenges for national parks in regard to environmental protection. We also welcome Meinrad Joos, president of the Schwarzwaldverein, the Black Forest Club, and US Consul General Patricia, Lacina. Before I hand over to you, Mr. Joos, please make sure to leave your microphones turned off during the event to ensure good audio quality for everyone, but feel free to leave your cameras on for us to see a few friendly faces. We need more friendly faces in these times, I think. Questions can be posed via the chat function. At best, you direct them to me, your host, Sabine Pavletta. We will pose the questions at the end of the conversation then to our panelists. And now, without further ado, we will hear from Meinrad Joos and Consul General Patricia Lacina. Und als wahrer transatlantischer Dialog, als wahres transatlantisches Gespräch werden wir jetzt einmal kurz in das Deutsche wechseln. Und ja, Herr Joos, Sie dürfen. Willkommen.
Yeah, thank you very much, and good evening to you around the world, all the people who are friends from the forests and friends from a very nice landscape. And though I'm very happy to give you some words about the Black Forest and the Black Forest Club, you heard about something. I think, I don't know how many people are on the English road and how many people of the German language. Perhaps I can try to do it also in English. I don't know what is the better way, perhaps for Pavletta.
Sie dürfen auch gerne auf Deutsch. Wir sind hier ganz transatlantisch eingestellt.
Ja, dann nochmals herzlich willkommen an Sie alle. Ich freue mich sehr bei diesem Tag, dem World Earth Day. Ich glaube, das ist ein ganz, ganz wichtiger Anlass, dass wir Menschen uns darüber nachdenken und uns damit Gedanken darüber machen, wie wir mit dieser Welt umgehen, was wir von dieser Welt verlangen und was umgekehrt die Welt von uns eigentlich verlangt. Ich darf ein Grußwort sprechen für den Schwarzwaldverein. Das ist der älteste Wanderverein in Deutschland und der zweitgrößte Wanderverein in Deutschland, vor über 160 Jahren in Freiburg gegründet. Er umfasst noch Flächen weit über den Schwarzwald hinaus. Er geht von Konstanz am Bodensee bis nach Heidelberg und im Südwesten nach Lörrach an die Schweizer Grenze. Und er wurde vor 160 Jahren von Menschen gegründet, die eigentlich genau diese Gedanken in sich getragen haben. In der damals harten Zeit, Freizeit hatte da noch einen anderen Stellenwert als heute, waren es Naturschutzmenschen, die dem Naturschutz nachgegangen sind. Und es waren auch, das muss man betonen, Menschen, die den sanften, naturbasierten Tourismus nach vorne bringen wollten. Es waren namentlich auch vorausschauende Gastronomen, die den Schwarzwaldverein gegründet haben, mit den 3 klaren Zielen, einen passenden Tourismus in den Schwarzwald zu bringen. Das war damals auch das Thema mit dem Skifahren ziemlich parallel dazu gelaufen. Es waren Menschen, die die Natur auch schützen und in seiner Schönheit schützen und erhalten wollten. Und es waren Menschen, die das Wandern für viele Menschen in den Gruppen und vor allen Dingen mit vernünftigen und guten Wanderkarten und Wanderwegen auch für den Tourismus erschließen wollten. Heute haben wir über 200 Ortsvereine. Wir sind also ein Hauptverein als Dachorganisation mit über 200 Ortsvereinen und über 60.000 Mitglieder, die sich diesen Themen ehrenamtlich verschrieben haben. Und wir sind seit 25 Jahren auch ein anerkannter Naturschutzverband, der eben das Thema des Earth Day, denke ich, ganz intensiv in seiner Verantwortung trägt. Wir haben uns vor 2 Jahren eine neue Satzung gegeben mit einem modernen Leitbild, das ich jetzt nur erwähnen kann in der Kürze des Grußwortes. Ich würde Sie aber alle einladen, sich mal auf der Homepage des Schwarzwaldvereins, die haben wir ganz neu gestaltet, einfach auch nochmal dort umzuschauen und sowohl unsere Leitbilder wie auch unser Kernangebot, und das möchte ich doch noch erwähnen, in der ehrenamtlichen Arbeit des Schwarzwaldvereines sind heute im Schwarzwald und im westlichen Teil von Baden-Württemberg über 24.000 Kilometer Wanderwege, sowohl Wanderpfade wie auch fürs Fahrrad geeignete Rad- und Wanderwege ausgezeichnet und beschildert mit einem einheitlichen Erkennungssystem. Unser Signet ist die Raute. Die rote Raute kennzeichnet den Schwarzwald, den Westweg. Wir haben gelbe, rote und blaue Rauten, je nach Örtlichkeit und Regionalität. Wann immer Sie diese Raute im Schwarzwald antreffen, können Sie große Gelassenheit an den Tag legen, dass Sie auf Ihrem Weg auch wieder zurückfinden. Wir haben über 15.000 Standorte, Schilderstandorte, die diese Wege kennzeichnen. Und es werden im Jahr über 25.000 ehrenamtliche Arbeitsstunden von Menschen, die die Natur lieben und Menschen, die einen guten, respektvollen Umgang mit der Natur haben wollen, die sich für die Kennzeichnung und vor allen Dingen für die Pflege und Unterhaltung dieser Wanderwege verschrieben haben. Wir haben, Frau Dr. Stübner, seit der Nationalpark besteht auch eine Kooperation mit dem Nationalpark. Die Rauten sind auch dort zu finden. Das zeigt unsere überregionale Zuständigkeit und unser überregionales Engagement. Wir sind aber sehr froh und dankbar dafür, dass wir da eine gute Zusammenarbeit haben. Ich habe gerade in der letzten Woche eine Videokonferenz mit dem Herrn Dr. Waldenspul gehabt, wo wir auch ein bisschen die weitere Zukunft skizziert haben. Ich selber möchte Ihrer Veranstaltung viele gute Erkenntnisse geben. Ich lade Sie alle, wenn Sie jetzt vielleicht in Deutschland sind oder wie die eine Kollegin vorher gesagt hat, in Deutschland, in Staufen heiraten, dazu ein, den Schwarzwald zu besuchen. Ich glaube, das kann ich mit Überzeugung sagen, das lohnt sich. Was ich umgekehrt dann auch von Ihrem Part des Nationalparks Yosemite sagen kann, auch da hatte ich das Glück, vor 5 Jahren ein paar Tage dort unterwegs zu sein. Und ich finde das toll und gratuliere dem Carl-Schurz-Haus dazu, auch diese Veranstaltung in diesem großen Netzwerk an diesem bedeutenden Tag zu begehen. Ich halte es für ausgesprochen wichtig und ich glaube, unsere Natur hat es verdient, dass wir uns Gedanken um sie machen. Und ich sage immer als Verantwortlicher des Schwarzwaldvereins, wenn es mal Konflikte gibt, zum Beispiel zwischen Wanderern und Radfahrern, die Natur ist für alle da. Und wenn wir gegenseitig und respektvoll mit der Natur und den Mitmenschen umgehen, dann funktioniert das auch. Und in diesem Sinne wünsche ich Ihnen einen guten Verlauf, eine schöne Veranstaltung. Und ich bin gespannt nachher auf die Diskussion. Herzlich willkommen.
Vielen Dank, Herr Joos. Thank you very much, Mr. Joos. I would hand over now to Consul Patricia Lacina to hear from the American side. Patricia, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And happy Earth Day. And what a great day to celebrate National Park Week. Thanks so much to Sabina and the wonderful team of the Carl-Schurz-Haus in Freiburg for organizing and hosting this event. They make it look seamless, but it's never easy. And greetings to Meinrad Joos. I agree with what you said, how important nature is for all of us and how we all need to share it. Very, very welcome remarks, I think. It's such a pleasure to meet all of you. I've been an advocate for the environment and a fan of outdoor activities my entire life. My dad was a big conservationist, so I couldn't go against that. And I've always been proud of America's best idea, our extensive national park system. Filmmaker and honorary park ranger Ken Burns tells the story of our national parks. Little did I know I would get to meet one of the stars of that film today, Shelton Johnson of Yosemite National Park. Shelton, it is such an honor and a pleasure to meet you, at least virtually. I look forward to meeting you in person at some point. Some people might not know that you're not only a Yosemite legend, but also an acclaimed author. I've started to read your novel, Glory Land, about the Buffalo soldier Elijah Yancey at Yosemite in 1903, and I can't wait to follow his adventures. So if you're a literature fan, look up this book. Simone, it's been too long. I have such fond memories of the hike you and I and the junior rangers took in the Black Forest and the picnic at the Wildersee and just the experience of being one with nature. And who could forget the snakes? I hope we will be able to do that again at least once before I leave Germany. I am so happy you actually got to go to Yosemite during your exchange program with the State Department for German Rangers a few years ago. I'm sure that's a memory that, you know, is still with you. This week, the U.S. mission to Germany is also celebrating, as we've said, Transatlantic Innovation Week. And we could not have picked a better time for this. Transatlantic collaboration has been driving innovation for decades and is at the forefront of solving the world's most pressing issues, such as climate science, uses of advanced technology, artificial intelligence, defense, and now virology. We must modernize our alliances, looking beyond government to the private sector, civil society, philanthropies, cities, and universities. Climate change and environmental diplomacy are top priorities for the US government. As the world unites under the theme, Restore Our Earth, President Biden is inviting leaders from around the world, including German Chancellor Merkel, to the Leaders Summit on Climate at the White House. To create lasting change, we need diverse voices. I'm looking forward to hearing from some of those voices tonight as they address innovative approaches to environmental education, the challenge of keeping a balance between tourism and conservation in their parks, and future collaboration opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Consul Lacina. And I'm sure we're eager to hear from our panelists now, so please let me introduce our protagonists very briefly to you tonight. Our panelist from California was already a little bit introduced as an author. Shelton Johnson, he is a native of Detroit, Michigan, actually, and has been a ranger with the National Park Service for more than 30 years now. What started out as a summer job at Yellowstone National Park really turned into a passion and finally a very successful career as a park ranger. Shelton has worked at Yosemite National Park since 1994 and has met celebrities such as Barack Obama and Oprah Winfrey in his work as a ranger, and will certainly tell us a little bit more about those meetings and what they were all about. He is particularly committed to introducing the African American population to national parks and to explore their connection to nature. Shelton Johnson spent part of his childhood in Germany, actually, also near Berchtesgaden, where he had his first incisive experiences with nature in the Alps and also in the Black Forest. Welcome, Shelton. We're honored to have you here.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you. On the German side, let me introduce you Dr. Simone Stübner from the Black Forest National Park. Simone is originally from Berlin, Germany, and she has a PhD in forestry, stating herself that as a young adult or in her youth, it was her dream and her goal to save the Amazon. But instead, and luckily so, she contributes now to saving parts of the Black Forest. Simone has worked for the Black Forest National Park since its opening in 2014 and is head of public relations and the administrative office. She also visited Yosemite National Park, as Consul Lacina already pointed out, as part of an exchange program by the US Department of State for German rangers. And this visit actually impressed her deeply and inspired also her further work. Welcome, Simone.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm happy to be here. It's an honor.
We're happy to have you. And last but not least, the conversation is moderated by Alison Wildman. And Alison is originally from Portland, Oregon, and has a background in urban planning and design, focusing on sustainable urban and regional planning, sustainable mobility, and transition planning. She is coordinator for governance and social innovation at the ICLE, Local Government for Sustainability Europe, here in Freiburg. Welcome also to you, Alison. And I would say, Alison, now the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sabina. Can everyone hear me? Just to make sure the mic is working. Great. Thank you. I was so thrilled that the Carl-Schurz-Haus asked me to moderate this event. I'm a transatlanticist with 1 foot in Germany and 1 foot in the US, or as I can say, part of my heart in Germany and part of my heart in the US. And I have a 20-year history of working in sustainability, and I have a 20-year history of living and working and exploring the Pacific Northwest lands, which really imparted a deep love of nature and that awe that comes with seeing incredible nature. And of course, it's Earth Day, so it felt like the perfect conversation to be a part of, and I'm really happy to be here with you both and all of you from the rest of the world. It's nice that you could join us too with this technology. Though I bet we're all a little zoned out by now, I think. So I'm a big believer in local action. I'm a big believer in human connection. I'm a big believer in storytelling and taking inspiration from one another. And to get these things, we need more events like this. Ideally, we would do this face-to-face, but this is what we have to bring us together, to share stories, to share impressions, to laugh a little, to feel a little, to connect our experiences to bigger questions and more complicated issues. Questions about the kind of world we want to live in, the kind of world we want our kids to live in, and their kids too. Nature and national parks are a great place to start. sharing some of those experiences and how they can connect to these bigger questions. But before we jump into the main part of the program, I want to do a quick icebreaker speed round to where I would ask both of you, Shelton and Simone, several questions. So you should try to answer them as succinctly as possible. And we'll start very simply. And so you ready to begin? Mm-hmm. Okay, Shelton, Lindt, Milka, Rittersport, or Hershey's chocolate for hiking?
Chocolate of any sort, I'm inclined to, so I would not distinguish between any of those.
Very diplomatic, thank you. Simone, campfire s'mores, yes or no?
Well, I'm not sure. I have never tried them, but they are very sweet, I guess, and sticky and make the teeth ache when you just look at them. So I guess I would love them.
This summer, Baden-Baden, I'm coming to you with some s'mores. Shelton, have you personally rescued any national park visitors?
Yes and no. No, in the sense that in terms of the physicality of an event where they were in danger of being perhaps trampled by a bison and so forth, I have not. But I think I've prevented people from making that mistake in terms of getting too close to wildlife. And I think so, in that sense, there was a rescue beforehand, but it was a rescue nonetheless when you see someone approaching a grizzly bear in Yellowstone and they don't realize that they're much too close because the bear is aware of them. So I think that to some degree is a rescue.
Pre-rescue, definitely. Simone, have you ever been chased by a wild animal larger than a squirrel?
Well, it depends what you define as a wild animal. I guess the wildest and most dangerous animal is probably humans on this planet. And I guess that our animals in our park are likely more to be chased by humans than the other way around, I'm afraid. So they would rather hide when they would meet humans. So if you're not talking about mosquitoes or ticks, which you really can't run away from, I guess not, no.
Okay. Shelton, what is your most asked question from the public? Where's the restroom? Simone, what's your most asked question from the public?
Same, but as well, like what are the animals living in the park? This is very popular to ask.
Okay, Shelton, we know that Simone wanted to save the Amazon rainforest. What was your childhood dream job?
My childhood dream job was to be an astronaut.
Cool. Simone, if you could trade places with a colleague, who would it be?
Oh, I think no one, because I really love my job, and sometimes I'm jealous of the rangers who can work outside in the nature, but only if the sun is shining. And if it's come to cold, rainy days, I'm very happy in my office. So I think I wouldn't change.
Great. Thank you very much for entertaining me with this icebreaker. So now we'll get to the real part of the program. I hope that inspires you. I don't quite remember if Sabina said it, but if you have questions, please put them in the chat. We'll collate them and collect them along the way, and then she will curate them, and we will ask you to unmic yourself and ask your question later at the end of the talk. Also, something else to note, as I remember from one of our earlier chats, is that Shelton does not represent the views of the MPS. He's here as his own sharing his own personal experiences. So he's not speaking on behalf of MPS policy. Is that correct, Shelton? Did I get that right? Good. Okay. So Shelton, let's start with you. You spent some time in Germany as a young child, and in our pre-talk, you told us a very powerful story about your trip that you took to the Berchtesgaden with your parents. Do you mind sharing that story about your connection to Germany and how these experiences have influenced your personal and professional pathways as a poet, as a storyteller, and as a U.S. park ranger?
Yeah, I would be honored to do so. Essentially, I used the term, it was an awakening. I was 5 years old and my father was stationed, in Germany. And we lived in a little town called Kuntwisch near a bigger town called Zweibrücken. And there was a family trip to Berchtesgaden. And I had never been to the mountains before, and no one had really talked to me as a child about what that experience would be like. But all I remember is that I stood at a railing, and there was an abyss, beneath my feet, and I could look down thousands of feet below me. And I saw clouds 1,000 feet below me. And normally clouds are up in the sky, not beneath one's feet, but they were below me. And I could see the shadow of the clouds over the earth. And I was holding my mom's hand, and I was holding my father's hand in the other hand. And I felt suspended between heaven and earth. And it was windy. It's always windy in the mountains. And the only thing that anchored me and kept me in place were the hands of my parents. And both of my parents have passed away since then, but I can still feel their hands in mine. And I can still feel that coldness of that wind. And I should have been frightened, but I was actually exhilarated. I was thrilled because the world was all around me and I was in its embrace, and the clouds were around me and the light, and I can still feel their hands in my hands, and I can still feel suspended in space. And it was an awakening. It's the best way to put it. I realized, I was born into that environment, and there was a part of me that woke up to the earth itself, that the earth is not just a living organism, but as a sentient being. I think of Lovelock and the whole Gaia hypothesis, that the earth itself can function as a single organic organism. And I felt that. It was not something literal, it was something that was spiritual and psychological. And I'm saying this is because that's why I'm a ranger. I never forgot that awakening in the mountains. And so I've always longed to be in them. And even though I'm sitting here right now, well, actually, I am in the mountains. I'm in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada. So that's has always stayed with me, that experience.
Thank you. How old were you?
I was 5 years old.
5. And was that your first memory of kind of awesome nature?
Yeah, that's the first memory and the most lasting.
Thank you. Simone, you had an opportunity to visit the US and explore some of the parks and wild spaces on an exchange that you did as part of the National Park Service Centennial in 2016, if I'm correct. And you mentioned quite tragically that you spent a lot of your time in Yosemite in a traffic jam. This is tragic. But what were a few of the key impressions that you had from that trip that inspired you, either personally or in your work with the Schwarzwald?
Yeah, it was a wonderful, amazing trip, as well Yosemite as the other parks we saw. And it's just also huge, so giant, so wide, so high, so deep. I mean, everything is just more than in Germany, like it seems. So it's spectacular. And this is something you only can marvel at. And I couldn't stop taking pictures. So it's fantastic. On the other hand, of course, I saw that traffic jam, and I saw the challenge the American colleagues have to face with such an international popularity, with so many visitors. And this isn't easy to deal with, I guess. And I think every park in the world is facing that challenge. How do we come to that point that we can bring together interests of human and nature? And I think in America, they found wonderful solution that works very well, how they direct people, but their parks are huge. I mean, they are huge and we are so tiny. So we don't have these possibilities that Americans have, just to give some parts of a park away to the people and say there are still millions of hectares protected without humans. So somehow I was happy that our mountains are smaller, and as well as the visitor numbers. So we don't have to face these problems and these challenges. But I was completely amazed. It was fantastic.
Which other parks did you visit? Do you remember?
Oh yes, well, altogether I visited a lot of parks because I had been privately as well in America and visited many parks. But in that trip we went to Yosemite, we went to I think Golden Gate, which was very interesting, and the big trees, how was they called? Help me, Shelton, please.
Golden Gate National Recreation Area.
Yes, exactly. So we visited many parks as well, historic parks, which I don't remember all the names, but it was amazing to see.
That is one interesting thing about the NPS system, the national park system in America. It's not just natural parks. It's a wide range of parks that are urban or historic or cultural. It's a very nice mix. Thank you. Shelton, now everyone knows now and probably tuned in, but you were prominently featured in a popular Ken Burns documentary in 2009 called The National Parks, America's Best Idea, which is a really great visual celebration of America's federal public lands. And I'd highly recommend it to our German audience, if you haven't seen it, to learn about how the parks were created, its history, and just to see some eye candy of some beautiful scenery. Dayton Duncan is a historian and writer who collaborated on the project, and he has a really great quote in the film. He says, "At the heart of the park idea is the notion that by virtue of being an American, whether your ancestors came over on the Mayflower or whether they just arrived, whether you're from the big city or from a rural setting, whether your daddy owns a factory or your mother is a maid, you are the owner of some of the best seafront property this nation has. You own magnificent waterfalls. You own stunning views of mountains and stunning views of gorgeous canyons. They belong to you. They're yours. And all that's asked of you is to put it in your will for your children so that they can have it too." I think we Americans are pretty lucky to capitalize on that early foresight to protect a lot of these amazing lands and cultural sites, particularly as our country continues to develop and rapidly urbanize. But as you noted when we talked previously, these magnificent areas are not really accessible to everyone in America, especially people of color. Could you talk about or elaborate on your distinction between being accessible and being the difference between that and being inviting and welcoming, and how you've committed your career to making national parks and nature more welcoming for everyone, especially the Black community?
Yeah, I think it's important to clarify what these barriers are. They're barriers to inclusion and to the whole idea of national parks. And a lot of it has to do with advertisements, with advertising. When the national park idea first took root, in Yellowstone on March 1st, 1872, the thing to keep in mind is that the country was a very different space, a different place than it is today. And by that, what I mean is women did not have the rights they have today. People of color, communities of color did not have the rights that they have today. And so it's when you drive, for example, into Yellowstone National Park through the north entrance, it says on the Roosevelt Arch, for the benefit and enjoyment of the people. So we also have to keep in mind that at that time, when the park idea was rooted and bearing fruit, African Americans and people of color were not necessarily considered the people. I mean, you have to ask, what people are you referring to? And that has changed through time, but what has not changed are the memories of those experiences. And so often we live in the present, but the past lives with us. As a writer by the name of William Faulkner once put it, the past isn't dead, it isn't even past. And so the result is many communities of color do not necessarily feel that connection because they never received an invitation, an outright invitation that these places were part of their cultural inheritance. And that really is my work. My work is to communicate that all Americans, regardless of the nature of their birth, regardless of their sexuality, regardless of their religion, any of those things that tend to separate people rather than bring them together, that all people are bound to the earth, and all Americans that are citizens, they are connected to the national parks as part of their birthright. It is their inheritance. And it is an incredibly powerful thing to tell someone who grew up experiencing poverty, experiencing racism, experiencing all these things that push them away, to find and tell them that there is an inheritance that brings them together and that pulls them closer to the earth. And that's what drives me. I'm driven by seeing that look of wonder in a child's face who could not even conceive of a Death Valley, a Yellowstone, a Zion, a Canyonlands, or Berchtesgaden, or the Black Forest. There are communities that just don't know about these environments, and they deserve and have a right to know about these special places because they own them as well. And that's my work, to connect the disconnected.
What kind of things have you done as part of that work? Can you give a couple examples?
Well, one thing that's important to do is first to communicate a sense of ownership. If no one has knocked on your door, I mean, when I grew up in Detroit, no park ranger ever knocked on my door and said, "Excuse me, hi, I just wanted you to know that you own the Grand Canyon, you own Zion, you own Redwood National Park. It's part of your inheritance as an American. And I'm just here to let you know the door's open and come on in." That never happened. And so in the 60s, for example, the 1960s, when the Park Service was first, communicating those messages of inclusion, inclusivity, connection, those messages were not necessarily received within many of these communities. They were advertising on a wavelength that was not necessarily listened to for many of these communities. So the result was parks didn't exist. I didn't know anyone growing up in Detroit that within my community that had ever not only visited a national park, had ever thought about visiting a national park. And that's the problem. Children live in an experience of wonder every single day. When you are a child, you look out and you see a plant. It is the first time that you have ever seen that plant. A bird flies overhead. It may be the first time you've ever seen that bird. And so there's this look of wonder with everything. That's what's wondrous about childhood. It's an experience of wonder. Well, what could be more powerful than to take that sense of awakening and transplant it to a national park that would just amplify and expand to a deep spiritual level how wonderful and how miraculous the universe is. And every child in every country in the world needs to have that experience, should have that experience as part of what it means to be a human being. So that's what drives me.
Cool. One last small question, sorry, a little off script, but has anyone come up and personally thanked you for your work and said, "I want to be a park ranger because of you"? Have you had this experience?
Yeah, I've had that experience, especially after convincing Oprah Winfrey to come to Yosemite and amplify that message of inclusivity. I've had African Americans that have come up to me just to shake my hand and say thank you. And I could see as they were walking away that they had, I call it the look, that there was something in their eye, a light in their eye, a fire of spirit that wasn't there before, because they're looking up and they're seeing El Capitan, or they're looking up and they're seeing Half Dome. And for me, that's medicine to see that.
Wonderful, thank you. Simone, we talked a little bit about some of the same inclusion issues in Germany, particularly those with migration background, and also, interestingly enough, people in a certain age bracket. I was surprised about that a little bit between this. But a bigger issue seems to be rather local acceptance and support of this relatively new concept of national park in Germany. Could you talk a little bit about how the Nationalpark came to be and some of the challenges your team had to overcome to make that happen? And how do you work on acceptance and growing support for America's best idea in a totally different context?
Yes, thank you. It was a very exciting time. I was part of a small team who was steering that process, that political process for the implementation of the park. And it took nearly two years to fight for that park and to get the decision into the parliament. And we were trying to involve people as much as we could, because of course in the region there were fears that this park could change lives, could change quality of life, that people would change their habits, that they couldn't pick any more blueberries or mushrooms or something like that. So we tried really to inform people a lot. We were working night and day nearly to going to information evenings, discussion rounds, workshops, participation platforms online and as well in live. So we tried everything to take people with us, and I think that was somehow quite successful in some ways. On the other hand, there are still people who are not completely convinced of the idea of the park, but probably there will be always people who don't think the park is necessary. But it was very exciting to fight for that goal, because we thought it's a very important thing that Baden-Württemberg is going to have a national park as well. It was the last country in Germany who still hadn't a park. And we were the first ones who tried to bring that park together. It was a very lovely thing to do, to create that park, and it was like to bring a dream to come true, like to give it somehow birth. So it was wonderful.
How is a German national park different from an American national park? Do you have fees? Do you, is it a boundary? Do you have regulations? How is it different?
We don't have any fees, but we have, of course, regulations that are very similar to American parks. You have to stay on the path. You have to put your dog on the leash. You are not allowed to have fires. I think this is very similar, but of course, the organization is very different to American parks. We are part of the ministry, and every country in Germany has its own kind of organization. It's very different from country to country. And a big difference which I noticed when I was in America is the foundations. I thought the National Park Foundation in America are very powerful, and I was really amazed how much money they are dealing with and how much money people are happy to give to the foundation in America. Charity seems to be a very big thing there, and I can't imagine this in that amount in Germany. People pay tax and that's it. You know, so the foundations really amazed me because they really did a lot of infrastructure there, the toilets and whatever, that as I understood it right. So this was a big difference to German parks, I guess.
Are there plans for more national parks in Germany?
I'm not sure. It will be difficult. There were in Bavaria they tried, but that idea failed. So I think in the moment we are happy with our park and try to bring it forward and have a better quality. There are still a lot of things to do, but I'm not sure if anyone is considering another park. I don't know.
And to just be clear, it was founded in 2014, right? The park opened or was established? Yeah. And does it have programs associated with it? Like educational programs or anything like that? Yeah.
Sure. We have a lot of education programs. We have even teachers working with us. We have a big exhibition now, which is still not opened. We have a huge visitor center, which is still not opened. It's completely new. It's wonderful. But I hope soon in the summer people can come, and we have cooperation with schools and kindergartens, and we do a lot of educational work for adults and children, for both. We have rangers who do guided tours and everything like that.
Wonderful. Can't wait to visit. This is a question for both of you, and you can decide who takes it first. But in your personal opinion, has social media helped or hurt our public lands?
Go first, Simone.
Okay, thank you. Well, this is very difficult to say. I think social media has two sides, like you say. It's an easy way to reach people, especially the younger ones, the young adults, which are very difficult for us to reach and to connect with. And I'm sure we should do much more to get in touch with them, because they are the future. Of course, they will have children, and they will have to educate their children in nature conservation. And social media would open up a lot of possibilities, which we still don't use enough. On the other hand, well, you can control what influencers or content creators are posting. And sometimes they post things that are not legal, that are not right. Like, for example, which would be interesting for you, Shelton, in Berchtesgaden, there was this year a case that an influencer posted one post which caused a lot of trouble to a situation that went out of control, because millions of people, not millions, I exaggerate, of course, but a lot of people came to that place, and that place was strictly protected, and the rangers couldn't handle it anymore. And this influencer took back that post because she thought that's the way I do money, and it was a big conflict. And of course, no one wishes that, because we can't control what anyone is putting in social media. So I think it can be a blessing and a curse in the same time. I'm not sure what to answer here.
Shelton?
No, I think in general, it's a positive because it's another platform for communication between people. And you can't have too many wavelengths of sound that are accessible to more and more people. But I think that since it's, here in the United States, to a great degree with the internet, it's I wouldn't say it's the Wild West, but it has some traits of regulation or the lack thereof that I think that are still being worked out. So basically, yes, it's a positive thing, having more pathways for people to communicate, to walk on. But at the same time, there's this issue with misinformation. If you just get your information from a source that's not necessarily a source that is with the government and it's about a national park, then that information could be incorrect. And if the information is incorrect, that could lead to issues. For example, if a trail is closed for a specific reason and someone hears through this on a social media platform that trail, you can still take it, just do this. Well, if those folks don't communicate why that trail was closed, depending on what park you're in, that could be a hazard. It could be an active rockfall area. And there could be a rock slide that could take place at any moment. If you're in Yellowstone, it could be an area where there's an elk, a mother elk that lost her calf, but is still standing there near her calf, protecting her calf, which I did experience when I was in Yellowstone. And people have no idea that you don't want to get close to an elk that has lost her young and is still sensitized to that, because animals are emotional beings just the way that we are. So it's important to understand the source through which you're getting that information. And is it a verifiable, factually accurate source? And that's the problem or the challenge with social media, is that how can you document and clarify and verify that this information that you're looking at is absolutely correct?
Yeah, this applies to a lot of things.
Yeah.
So we have about 10 minutes officially, and I wanted to end with a more philosophical approach, but it doesn't have to be. But a key message of Earth Day is think globally, act locally. And for me, this means connecting like this, practitioner to practitioner, educator to educator, human to human, and having conversations across political and geographic boundaries, and learning from and inspiring one another as we take on these big challenges at the local level. And that said, without getting too meta or too philosophical, what is the one thing that you'd like people who are listening today to take away with them from this conversation? It can be philosophical, it can be a call to action, it can be something as simple as bringing consciousness or awareness to an idea or something, whatever you're most passionate about. So please, whoever would like to start. Simone, would you like to start?
Yes, okay, thank you. I think it's always the same. I really would wish for my work or for the popularity of national parks is that people see and understand the necessity of nature conservation. And the most important I try to reach during my work time, and what I'm fighting for, is that people see that we are not guarding nature against humans, but that we are saving nature for them, for humans and for their kids and their grandchildren and for the next generation. And this is a really huge difference. And many people can't see that here in Germany. And I really wish that this evening would help to understand this difference and to see these parks protected for me, and this nature is protected for me and my kids. And if people would understand that, our future is safe.
Thank you. Shelton?
You know, I just wish that every human being on the face of the earth could share the view that Neil Armstrong had with the lunar landing, the Apollo mission, when they stood in the Sea of Tranquility and they saw the Earth rise. They're the only human beings in history that have seen the Earth rise up over the horizon of another world, our own moon. And when they saw that view, what they were seeing most clearly, they were seeing the atmosphere, the biosphere, the hydrosphere, the geosphere. They were seeing all these constituent elements of the earth itself. And there was a totality to that vision. And there was a beauty to that vision because they saw the sterile environment of the moon itself, without an atmosphere. And they were looking out into the stars that were so distant and remote. And there's this one green, bluish sphere that was in front of them that was so filled with light, so filled with promise, so filled with beauty and the innate beauty of the earth itself. And if every human being could stand in the sea of tranquility the way that they did and have that view, we'd have not many arguments about whether or not places should be protected, because every time a national park is created, it's a section or a segment of the earth itself that we are saying is sacred. And we need to get to the point as a species where we recognize the entire earth is sacred or none of it is sacred. The universe and science does not work that way. We cannot fragment something that was never meant to be fragmented. There is a totality that we are all a part of. And when we venture into a national park for a moment, for a period of time, we are in the embrace of that totality. We are in the embrace of that higher power. We are in the embrace of the cosmos itself. And that's what we should be working toward. And that's why national park visits are so important, because it is a homecoming for every human being to go back to a time when we were primates. We still are primates, but we have lost that primal connection to the earth, that sense of sacredness with the earth. And that's why when we are in the presence of indigenous people, those few indigenous populations that exist in the world, those are the teachers, those are the wisdom keepers, those are the folks we should be listening to, because they never left Eden. They never left that sacred space. They still have that veneration. And that ultimately is what we have lost. We have lost that sense of veneration for the earth itself, for nature itself. And that is why we despoil nature, because we no longer recognize it, that sacred connection that we all have innately as human beings.
Wonderful, thank you. That's very poetic. The practitioner part of me is like, okay, what's some action items? How can we do that? How can we make everything more sacred? Both of you, this has been really wonderful. We've ended a little bit early on the program bit because I think that people just want to ask you questions and have a conversation. So I'm going to ask Sabina if she's gotten any good ones, and we can unmic people and have a conversation here. Do you have any?
Yeah, definitely. There have come quite a few.
Mute myself.
Okay. Yeah, there have come actually quite a few questions, and there has already been a big discussion, which I really appreciate, on one particular topics, or maybe we could also say two topics really, and people are discussing, and maybe the two of you could enter this discussion and tell us a little bit about it. How do we get more young people into the park, and what would be the best way, you think, to also get minorities into parks, such as Shelton, on your side, African Americans have come up here also in the discussion. Yeah.
Who's speaking first?
You start, Shelton, please.
If it were up to me, and it's not up to me, but it's up to society, but if it were up to me, that no child in the world would grow up in the absence of an experience of immersion in the natural world. I think that everything that we're doing and all the problems that we have is the result of that loss of the sacred, which is why I think that the true wisdom that resides in these indigenous people throughout the world, people, of course, in places like Amazonia, who still have that primal connection. And I think that when kids grow up and they're so caught up in technology and virtual reality, and they realize that there's no greater reality than reality. And so that's what children need to experience, because childhood is an experience of wonder. A child is astonished by the most pedantic, the most banal of things. You could hold a pencil in front of a child, but if it's the first time they've ever seen a pencil, they're in awe of that pencil. You can hold up an eraser on the other side of that pencil, and they're in awe of that eraser. But what would be better would be to put them in an environment where awe is a natural response. when you're in the presence of a giant sequoia, when you're in the Serengeti and you see an elephant in front of you, you should be in awe. And the natural world is so full of places that inspire that sense of reverence and transcendence, but not all kids can have that experience. But what I'm saying is that that's part of the problem, is that there are great wonders in the world that a lot of our children growing up are not aware of, because they live in an industrial city, and most human beings around the world, and many of them live in urbanized areas. And so they've lost that connection with the earth itself. And I always think of the Greek myth of Antaeus and Heracles, and that Antaeus was undefeatable as long as his feet touched the earth. And Hercules defeated him by wrenching him from the ground. So he lost that connection with the earth, and then he strangled him in the air. And that is how he defeated him. What we're talking about here, what I'm talking about here, is the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution is how we as a species began to pull ourselves apart, separate ourselves from that which we should venerate. And as a result, we are losing the ability to breathe, because we've lost the connection and the ability to pray and give thanks to the world, the natural world that embraces all of us. And so the hope really is just kids. Get as many kids as possible by any means necessary into as many mountains as there still will always be, into the deserts, into the forests, to sit by the edge of an ocean or the sea, to watch the sun rise, to watch the sun set, to breathe in the air that was there that our ancestors knew, and to feel what they felt 1,000,000 years ago. And it's still here. And that earth, that beauty, that transcendence is still here. It is not just in the past, it's all around us if we choose to open ourselves up to it and embrace it.
Thank you, Simone.
Yes, I'm completely with you. I couldn't have said it so beautifully, but anyway, I think it's what we try. We work a lot with children, and from kindergarten age on, we have these Junior Ranger programs, and we bring schools to the park so that we try to work independently from parents, because some parents are not into nature and they would never take their kids to nature. We have a lot of children who had never been in the forest before, but who came with the school for a day trip to the national park. And I think this is the most important thing we can do, bringing schools to the park and showing kids the experience, let them touch, let them smell, let them hear the sounds of the forest or the silence, and let them experience the beauty of it. And this is all we can probably do, and it's the best thing we can do. I hope so.
Thank you. This is actually connected to a follow-up question about minorities, and somebody said that minorities need to see themselves in the park also, and they often just simply don't, and so it is really a big issue to bring more nationalities, more people from different backgrounds into the parks. Are there any programs, for example, NPS programs, or also Simone, from your side, are there any programs to include also more people with a migration background, for example?
I just thought, no, unfortunately not yet. We are aware of that problem somehow, but I think we are still focusing on children, but we know that we have to do more. But in fact, I think we still have no ideas how to do it. I think it's a problem of accessibility. You need a car to come to the national parks. That's the first problem. We are working on more traffic, on more public traffic, which would be one way to make it more accessible for people without a car, with a lot of kids who could come by bus, things like these. But I'm not sure if this helps, but as well here, if the kids are coming with the school, perhaps they get connected without the parents that perhaps have no connection to nature or to the Black Forest. But I think there is possibility to do more in the future.
You know, and I would say I agree with everything that you just said, Simone. I think that no minority thinks of themselves as a minority. They think of themselves as who they are. And if they're in a community of people who are like them, and none of those folks in that community venture out into these places, then they're unaware of these places. So that's why I think it's so important to communicate that sense of inheritance, that these young people own these environments, and that these environments are more than just spaces to occupy. It's a way of becoming rerouted, if you will, to the earth itself, because we are Homo sapiens, we are primates. It is bizarre as primates, as mammals, that we don't have this intimate connection to the earth itself. So I think that we need to just identify the barriers to inclusion and take them down and make it mandatory. You know, you get pulled over for speeding and you get a ticket. Why can't you get pulled over for not visiting Berchtesgaden? You know, not visiting the Serengeti. You know, you haven't been to Yellowstone in 5 months. That's against the law. You have not seen the Old Faithful geyser erupt in a year. This is the worst exemplar of avoidance of the earth that I've ever seen. I'm going to have to give you a citation. Here's your citation. Here's a ticket. You have to go to Montana, to Glacier National Park and or Yellowstone within 6 months, or you're going to have to appear before a judge, because you are in danger of estranging yourself from the earth itself, which is illegal as a primate, to be disconnected from the earth. Do you hear me? You know, I mean, we don't have rules like that in place, but we should, because we are the first organism, the first species in the history of this planet that is in danger of alienating itself from its own world, its own habitat or series of habitats. And so why, of course we're having these problems, because we are treating the earth as if it's not something that's part of us.
Thank you, Shelton. Actually, a question that came up to me, maybe a little bit of a fun one, or an excursion, if you wish. So have you brought up this idea to President Obama when you met him of ticketing people who did not come or do not come to the Yosemite National Park or national parks in general?
No, you know, you think, and the reason for it is that I was tasked with literally running up to the top of Vernal Fall and being there so that when the presidential party arrived, I would basically speak to him. And I had met him before, but he didn't remember. I met him in 2009, and then I met him again in 2016. But, you know, when he arrived at the top of Vernal Fall with the first family and the Secret Service and so forth, it was clear to me that he was having what I like to refer to as a moment. And I'm certain that Simone has seen the people who have that moment when they're in the Black Forest for the first time. They hear the silence of the forest for the first time. They hear the birds that are innate to that forest for the first time. They see the light cascading through the branches for the first time, and they feel this connection, and something is pulling them out of themselves into the landscape around them. And that was what was happening to President Obama. And I could see it in his eyes that he was with me, but he was with the earth at the same time. And he was just flowing with the flowing of the Merced River. And he was adrift with the Merced River. And so I wanted to ask him the things that you're saying to me. But I remember thinking, I would not like it if I was in the presence in the Serengeti and I was seeing my first African lion. I wouldn't like somebody pulling me and say, hey, I gotta talk to you about something. And so what I did was allowed him to have his moment in Yosemite, as all human beings should have. They should have that moment with the earth and not be interrupted. So I allowed him to have that moment, and I've cursed that decision ever since. Because there were so many things I wanted to say to him, so many things I wanted to communicate to him, to thank him for the Charles Young Buffalo Soldier National Monument, to thank him for, you know, his stewardship, his sense of emotional connection, you know, to these places. But he deserved, like any person visiting a national park, to have his moment with the world in the embrace of the earth. And I just let him have that silence, that stillness, and that connection to Yosemite. And I've regretted it ever since.
I don't think it was a very good decision. So I think he appreciated it as well. And I think that must have been also a great picture and a great experience to just see this inspiration in someone. whether this is President Obama or a president or just anybody, really.
Right.
Yeah. So there are some other questions, so I will go to a different topic. And this is related to the pandemic and the current pandemic. And somebody is asking whether during the pandemic, more people are visiting natural spaces and parks, and this has an environmental impact also. Could you talk a little bit about this environmental impact and what is the future of the national parks post-pandemic?
Simone?
Okay, I can start. Thank you. Sure, there had been much more visitors than ever, and especially different visitors. There were lots of people who came the first time to a national park. I guess people who would have spent the summer more likely in the south of Europe at the beaches, and they couldn't, and now they were looking for some fun at home, which is wonderful because we could reach people we never reached before. But of course, it was a lot of work for our rangers. They had to be there in the area all the time because not all of the guests were aware of our rules, and they had to learn that too. And I think we had a big chance now to reach these people and to tell them about parks and the rules, and as well of the beauty of nature. And we were facing some challenges this year. I have to admit, yes, because we were not equipped and not prepared for so many people, and the rubbish they brought with them, and the illegal overnight stays and fires and whatever came with them. But all together, I think it's a chance to reach people, and that people connect with nature, people who wouldn't do that otherwise. So yes, we had this.
Do you think it will last?
Well, probably this year it will last, and perhaps some of them will come again, because there had been a lot of young people in groups hiking and looking for fun, or looking for just biking or hiking, whatever. And I think some of them would love to come back, and that's good, but not all of them. I think there will be a mixture of it.
Thank you. Shelton, how is it in the US? How was the situation for Yosemite, and what do you think the situation will be for the future?
Well, the thing to keep in mind, of course, is Yosemite is the most popular national park in California, and California is the most populous state in the country. So we always have a lot of visitors, and of course there's all these protocols that are in place with regard to COVID-19. And so we encourage people to wear a mask, but it's up to them. We encourage people to impose on themselves some measure of isolation from other groups, but it's up to them. So that's one of the challenges of living in a democracy, which literally means government of the people. We can make suggestions, we can suggest how people should behave, but when you look at humanity itself as a species, the suggestions on behavior often don't go very far. But we just try to have people understand everyone's innate gift of Yosemite belongs to them. So, and the thing that I found is that in general, people want their own space, but they also feel comfortable getting into other people's space as well. So how do we deal with that? The visitor center that normally is open is closed. And so we've externalized that space. And there are rangers in front of the Yosemite Valley Visitor Center who are answering questions, who are modeling the behavior that we wish to see modeled in the people who are coming to the park. The rangers have masks on, they're exercising physical distance and spacing between themselves. The shuttle buses aren't running because that puts people into a confined space with limited airflow. So we're modeling for the public the behavior we wish to see in the public without verbally having to say anything. And sometimes I think that's a powerful statement in and of itself. Behave the way you wish other people to behave. And for people who are alert to what you're doing, I think, and mindful of the reasons why, I think that is as successful as we can hope. But it is definitely a challenge. And it's understandable that why people want to come to Yosemite or Yellowstone or the Grand Canyon, because they want to get away from what they perceive as a negative to a space they perceive as a positive. But if so many people do it, then they turn that positive into something not quite so positive. And that's the challenge. There's so many different ways of looking at a national park and its relevance and its reason for being. And people with all their innate individual stories are showing us ultimately what they feel is important about a Yellowstone or a Grand Canyon or Zion. It's a space to get away from what's currently happening in the world. But they're bringing the world with them.
Thank you very much. I have one last question, and I encourage everyone. We still have a couple of minutes, so please let us know what you're curious about. So the last question that I have right now is, in regards to civic engagement and conservation, what role do you see citizen science playing, particularly in national parks and other protected areas?
Simone, me, it's up to you.
Yes, thank you. It's a difficult question. I think we do some citizen science, like there are apps when people can put on the finding of birds or plants or whatever. So kind of monitoring, which probably is very helpful for the long time knowledge about the plants and their existence in the park. And of course, it's very interesting how people feel in nature and in wilderness, especially because, well, in America, it's different. You have really dangers there. We don't have so many really dangerous animals and these dangerous rocks, and it's easier in Germany, but as well, how would they feel? How could they relax there? And how could we help them to relax and to connect with nature? And I think we could learn a lot from people if we could connect with them more with these kind of things, but you need a lot of people to reach them and a lot of resources, and we not always have that in that amount for these subjects.
And I would say that here in Yosemite, also throughout our national parks, we have visiting scientists who are always coming to any of the national parks, and they bring their expertise with them, and they're there to learn firsthand about what are the nuances in terms of how an organism is behaving or moving or shifting through in its habitat because of global warming or all these other effects that are happening. But basically, science is an integral part of any national park and any protected area, and it has been, for over 100 years for obvious reasons. You want to maintain the integrity of that environment, such as, for example, bringing wolves back to Yellowstone and restoring predator-prey relationships, or studying fire regimes and how they're shifting as a result of the effects of global warming. To a great degree, national parks are scientific laboratories where you can actually see what is happening in the world on a macro scale. You can see it on a micro scale right around you, and you can walk into it, you can experience it. But I still think that the most powerful thing, though, is the look on children's faces when you're giving a junior ranger program and they wake up to science. Because really, ultimately, what science is the language that we've invented to speak to the earth, to speak to the world, to speak to the cosmos. And I see that math is a language to understand the mechanics of celestial mechanics and how a distant world influences us, like the moon and its effect on the tides of the ocean. And so you can have these conversations in a national park. And that's what's great about parks. They provide that space where talking about something that's greater than all of us can happen. And so it could be a visiting atmospheric scientist who's looking at how pollution from the external world is impacting parks, because you can't put up a wall up to keep out pollutants that come from industry. And so we have those conversations, and the best places to have these conversations about the earth, I think, and feel deeply, are in the national parks. So when you can have everyone there, when you can have the experts there, the scientists there, and you can also have just regular people who have an interest in science and sharing that conversation. But those are the conversations that are the most important. And I think parks are the best places to have these dialogues.
Well said, definitely. Well said. Simone, are there any junior ranger programs or something for children in the Nationalpark Schwarzwald?
Yes, sure. We have, since the very first day, we have junior ranger programs. Some of our junior rangers are already teenagers, because we even started before the national park with the Nature Conservation Center that was there on the Ruhestein. And it's really lovely to see how they develop and how they already could guide their own groups, and how could they connect with younger people much better than we can. And we have lots of junior rangers in the region, yes.
That's great. That's great. Bring the young people in then. Okay. So there was one other question that is kind of also a fun question. Where would you like to see a park established where one does not exist yet?
In Germany or in other countries? That's the question.
I think all is fair.
Oh, that's an interest. I have to think about that. I think Germany is very crowded, and it's difficult to find a big enough place for a huge park. And there are probably lovely places where you could establish a park. But I guess the need for more national parks is much bigger in other countries, perhaps in the Amazon, of course, my favorite country, Brazil. I mean, they have some lovely parks, but you could never have enough there, I guess.
Yeah, I think for me, I've been really fascinated by the Maine woods, and I know there's a movement of folks in that area to turn that region into a national park. I was very much influenced by the Transcendentalists, so when you have in your mind, the words of Henry Thoreau, or Ralph Waldo Emerson, or the Lake District poets in England, or Schiller, Heinrich Heine, you just think about how words pull us into a particular type of environment, a particular type of space. So I have that inclination towards Maine. I've never been to Maine. I've never been to the Maine woods, but there's a part of me thinking of those New England poets and philosophers that I want to experience what they experienced. I want to see what they saw. And obviously we all want to feel what they felt when we read the poets that inspire us, the literature that has inspired us, because I always say to myself that the natural world itself is the inspiration for some of the greatest literature that human beings have engineered, if you will, but if engineering can be tied to the soul, to the spirit. And so I want to be in those same environments that inspired them, so that I will have that equal inspiration and to inspire someone else. And I think about the root of the word inspiration. It's a breathing in of spirit, and expiration, literally, that is that spirit going out into the world. And we call it death, but maybe it's another form of existence, another form of life. And you can have thoughts like this when you're in a national park, which is also to the value of these spaces and these sacred places that we all have in common.
Shelton, speaking of words pulling you into spaces, when is your next book coming out?
My next book will probably come out whenever I can retire. I have to stay in the uniform until that day, but I'd like to write another novel. I'd like to write a few novels, but I don't have the space, the time to do that. I'm in this uniform, and I love being in this uniform, and I love the work that I do. And so I just share that spirit that we all have through the gift that I've been given by being a ranger in Yosemite.
And don't forget the movie too, remember.
Which movie?
The movie, Shelton Johnson.
I don't know if I don't think that's going to happen. But if it were, that would be no. I don't think that's gonna happen.
I think there's room for a Buffalo Soldiers movie, actually.
Oh, the Buffalo. Oh, no, that should happen. That should happen, because I think it would be a very powerful thing to see Denzel Washington as Captain Charles Young, as the first African-American superintendent of Sequoia, telling the story of his time in giant forest and seeing the largest tree in the world by volume of wood. I think that Denzel deserves that moment, and so does Charles Young, and we need to yoke those two things together. Do you hear me, Hollywood?
Well, we hope so. That sounds like an amazing movie with a great actor. I have to say, I would definitely watch it. Maybe one last question, sort of as an inspiration to for our audience. I mean, we're only a small part of the world, we as humans, or as an individual, actually. But what would you say each of us can do for nature?
Simone, go ahead.
Oh, that's a complex question. Where can we start? Where can we end? I mean, I think there are millions of little things you can do. You can start in your own garden. You can let the mosquitoes live in your house, or the spiders. You can, I don't know, feed the birds, whatever. You can let the bees be there and plant some flowers in your garden. I mean, there are millions of little things. I think you just have to be aware of it, and you have to want it, and you have to be prepared to go one step back with your own interests and let the bees be, or the wasps, which you don't like because they could sting you. So I think the most important thing is to not take yourself so serious as a human, and accept the being of other species, and that they're equal, and that you let them be and help them to be, and gives them space to live, habitat. And if everyone would do that, I think we would come much better along with all the animals and the plants and the mushrooms and the species in our planet. And if we respect them, that would be a big thing.
Mm-hmm. What Simone just said.
Great.
No, I mean, seriously, it's as human beings, we have this innate desire to control. And I think that ant colonies have a similar desire. They create their own environment for themselves. But we need to give up control. We need to just open ourselves up to the lack thereof and allow the world around us to be the world around us. I mean, you know, if we all disappeared from our cities, the cities would be occupied by all the wildlife that's there, and they would make use of it. And we just need to let go and allow these other organisms to share the world with us. And that's that's really what this boils down to, is that human beings as a species, we need to not be so dominant and become more participatory. We need to become more, have a sense of a kindred connection to the world around us, and allow nature to just be nature, allow the world to just be the world. I think that's what we need to do. So, sorry for that.
Thank you very much. Thank you to both of you. I know that from the chat also, and for myself, this was a great conversation. So inspiring. We definitely need more people just like you with this kind of passion for their jobs, for nature, for encouraging people to learn more and to get inspired, and just also let themselves be inspired and have this moment in nature. And so it is so great that we could have this discussion between the US and Germany. And I think we all agree that we need more discussions like that, and more exchange, and that we need to stay in touch, and need to stay in conversation. So thank you to the two of you. I would also like to thank the audience, who was really, really eager to discuss. And this would have been so great if all of you could have been here at the Carl-Schurz-Haus, or outside in the Black Forest, or in Yosemite. And we could share this moment in nature and discuss all the issues. So thank you to the audience. Thank you, Alison, for moderating this talk. It was really great. So thanks for being here and helping us out. And I would also like to thank again our partners, the DATS in Stuttgart, our fellow DAIs in Heidelberg and in Tübingen. Of course, also the support of the State Ministry of Baden-Württemberg and the US Consulate General in Frankfurt. I would also like to bring your attention to 2 events. There is actually, if you are interested to hear more from Shelton, which I am sure most of you are now, if not all, I think all of you probably are interested to hear more about him. He will be at a talk next Wednesday with our friends from the EUREKA house in Munich, I believe, and with the consulate in Munich. So tune in. The link is in the chat to register. And also, as you know, this event was part of the series EUREKA, Ländle meets California, and is all about exchange in different areas. And the next talk will actually be organized by the DUTS in Stuttgart. And it is on May 18th, also at 7 p.m. Central European Time. And it will be about empowerment through participation. So it's actually quite fitting, and advancing opportunities for immigrants. Make sure to stay tuned to look at the DUTS's website and also our website. We will, of course, also advertise it, and make sure you register. So thank you, everyone, for this lovely evening. And yeah, hope to see you soon and see you in person. Bye.
Thank you.
Auf Wiedersehen.
That's super. Shelton, come to Germany.
Yes, we invite you.
Just tell me when, but I can't go without my wife, though. That would result in like something really bad.
You're both welcome. 2022, Germany or bust.
Yeah.
Yes, we have a youth
definitely.
visitor center now. We all can meet in the Black Forest National Park.
Yes, and I'll bring the s'mores. I'll bring the s'mores.
Oh yes, please.
But you,
Bye, everybody.
But you also want to keep in mind that I'll probably be an emotional wreck, because when I was in Germany, my mother, my father, my brother were all alive, and they have all since passed away. So I've not been, so when I go back to Germany, it'll be me with my own family, you know, and hopefully my wife and son. But I already know it. I already know I'm going to be, especially if I go to the Schwarzwald, if I go to Berchtesgaden, I will be a wreck, because I'm thinking I'm walking in a space. The last time I walked here, I was 5 years old with my mother and my dad and my brother, and they're gone, but they'll be with me, because our family, those who pass on, are always with us. So they'll be with me, I'll be with them, and it'll be good, and it'll be tears of joy that we're all reunited. Yeah, exactly.
And we all will be there, I'm sure.
Exactly.
To guide
we'll all
you
be
through.
crying. We'll all be crying for joy.
Great.
We can
And
cry
maybe
together.
by then we can all also have a group hug. That
Yes.
might
Right.
be possible anymore.
The pandemic will be
again.
over. No COVID.
Yeah, that would be great.
It'll be a
So
good
thank
thing.
you, everyone. Have a good evening. Have a good day, Shelton.
Thank
and
you.
Hope to see you soon.
Okay, pleasure working with all of you.
Bye.
Everyone, has been a joy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's do it again.
Oh yes, for sure.
Okay, all right.